Welcome to the third installment of Conversations with Kristen, where we are talking about can we talk about alcohol? April is Alcohol Awareness Month, and so I've been going live each week just to share my expertise, share my experience around the topic of alcohol, drinking problems, the effect on your body. And today we're going to talk about recovery options. So we've done a lot of digging to kind of figure out and understand the impact that alcohol can have, all the way from problem use to, alcoholism, and disordered use. Now we're going to talk about some good old recovery options. And there are plenty out there to talk about. I think it's just about for anybody, for you, or for anybody that you may be watching this on behalf of, it's about finding the right combination and moment, I think, for recovery to happen. Fortunately, unfortunately, it's very unique to the person. There really isn't a hard, fast rule. Even as somebody who has worked in addiction treatment as a professional and had my own recovery journey, I can't really tell you exactly what is going to make it work every single time. It's completely dependent on a lot of different factors, but thank goodness there are a lot of options out there for people who want and desire to explore their relationship with alcohol, get sober, reduce their drinking, whatever the case may be. There is pretty much an option out there for you. Now, when we get to talking about success rate, that'll be another question, but there is an option out there for every type of desire that you might have. That's what we're going to talk about today. Okay. So to qualify myself, I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have worked in addiction treatment at outpatient treatment facilities. So that is where my professional understanding of addiction treatment comes from. My own personal journey was through 12-step and community-based recovery meetings. So I have some professional experience at the treatment healthcare level, and then I have personal recovery experience in those community-based options. So I kind of got a good understanding of what's what when it comes to recovery. And honestly, since I have gotten sober over the last almost 10 years now, so crazy. There's been a lot of other options and some normalizing of not drinking and abstinence and sobriety that are becoming more common and popular. So those are all options. We are going to get into all of them, but I do want to just go down the pecking order, I guess you could say, of help that someone might need for recovery. I know for myself, early on, I was looking for the options and I'm just Googling and searching and kind of just, figuring it out on my own. Whereas the purpose of this video can serve as a way to kind of have a one-stop shop just to kind of understand at least what the lay of the land when it comes to getting help looks like. And then people can place themselves and figure it out from an individual perspective. So first and foremost, the most helpful and in-depth recovery option would be an intensive inpatient treatment facility. Now, this is usually reserved for people who either have a lot of money, like when you think about famous people, celebrities, people with a lot of money, that sort of thing. That is unfortunately, excuse me, oftentimes that type of treatment is very expensive. And so you will often hear of celebrities and people that come from wealth being able to access those treatment options regardless of their drinking pattern, whether they're dependent or just need to sober up or, whatever. That is usually pretty accessible to them. Whereas for the more common person, those treatment options are usually dependent on how severe your drinking problem is and access as well. So if someone has insurance, of course, that can be a great way for them to get plugged in with a treatment facility. Insurance will definitely work with the staff to determine how long a person can be there. Sometimes it's 15 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It really just depends, but it is insurance based and based on medical necessity. Okay. The tricky part with that is that drinking problems and alcohol use disorder and alcoholism are not a pass, fail, cured or not cured type of situation. It's a behavioral, physiological, lifestyle, biological. It encompasses all types of factors, and so it's really hard to say, are they cured? Because you're never really cured. It's just controlled and managed in a way. And so that becomes more important when people are deciding when to discharge from the 30, 60, 90 days. Is like, are they ready? Are they not ready? What's the plan after that? And so I say, if someone has the means to access an inpatient experience where they can, just kind of cut down on distractions and expectations and stress and burdens in order to really work on their true sobriety, I think that that's a beautiful thing. I wish that it was accessible to more people. I really think that that would be a beautiful thing for anybody, to be honest with you. Drinking problem or not, let's just all go and get better somewhere. You know what I mean? However, that's not always the case. And so sometimes people can stay there, for, like I said, a certain amount of time. And then they usually will bump down to another treatment option that is usually much more feasible and realistic for people, which is like an outpatient treatment facility. And that means that you're not staying the night there and weekends and really just plugged in all the time. You're usually in your home community, but you're going to a treatment facility that is closer by. That way people can keep a job and go, or if you have kids, you can do your treatment during the day, your groups and your therapy and your check-ins with the nurse and that sort of thing during the day, and still kind of have the rest of your life. Not that it won't be affected, but less impacted by your treatment process. And so that is where I've had some experience working with outpatient treatment, and it was either the day-long treatment option, or sometimes it was the half-day treatment option. It just depends on, again, that person, the severity of that person's drinking issue, the supports that they have, their readiness here to live a sober life. Those are all things that factor into how long you need to be there. But again, a really great environment to just learn, get the psychoeducation around addiction, to understand your symptoms of depression and anxiety and how to cope with those things. I mean, really all stuff that we all really need, but it's just that the necessity for it, the urgency around it is much higher for people who have a drinking problem, and thus the treatment option is there for them. And so that is something that also is managed by insurance, can be very pricey if you don't have it, which again is something that I just hope and wish would change, because all types of people can be affected by addiction, right? Addiction doesn't just go and choose the wealthy and the people with means and use them. Addiction can affect any person in any walk of life, and it's really unfortunate that only certain people are really able to freely access services that they actually need to get better, which adds to some discrepancies in the recovery process and everything in general. Because what would it look like if these folks that are not as financially stable or don't have the means could really get access to that same treatment and that same care? How might that level the scales of their life and their family's life and their kids' life, and a generational thing? It can get really deep when you think about it that way, to be honest with you. But still a great option if you have access to doing so. Now, regardless of whether you go to inpatient, outpatient, if you do all of the above, there are also community recovery meetings, community support meetings that are typically free and accessible to everyone. Alcoholics Anonymous being one of those. There are other Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, a lot of different places where you can go and access a meeting and the support that you need to get sober without that financial burden. But either way, even if you do go the inpatient or the outpatient route, the therapists there, the professionals there are absolutely 100% going to recommend, strongly encourage a community-based recovery, because nobody can stay in those treatment options forever. It's too expensive. It's not realistic. You're going to have to find a way to involve your life with something that is sustainable no matter what the circumstances are. And so AA, which sometimes you'll hear people refer to it as 12 step, is the most accessible and free. It is free for sure. And the most accessible meeting, support meeting that you're going to find. There's not a day that goes by in the whole calendar year where there is not an AA meeting happening. And I go so far as to say, I don't know if there, I mean, maybe in the middle of the night, there would be a time where there's not an AA meeting somewhere happening. There's almost always a meeting somewhere. And that's what makes it so beautiful and powerful, because anybody can come, anybody can stay, and you can be there as long as you need to be in order to take care of yourself. And so there is a process within AA. Some people just come. Full disclosure, I was a member of AA and did the full AA experience for many, many years. So I do know about this from lived experience, but you can come to the meetings and participate how you want to. Eventually, it is encouraged to, get with a sponsor, which is someone else who's been sober longer than you, at least a year, but probably way more than that, to help you go through some steps, which really, if you think about it, with my therapist brain, I'm like, this is really just helpful life stuff, dealing with the emotions that we try to avoid, and understanding your own character and personality and things that you want to improve and the ways that you sabotage and the ways that you don't show up in your world that would actually help you live a happier life if you did so. It's just really, really good. And there's also an element of making amends for things that have happened while you were drinking, which is where a lot of people's shame and guilt comes from. So there's a lot of beautiful factors and a lot of beautiful components of the AA experience that I think I would highly recommend, for people to experience that. Where people get hung up is the spiritual component of AA. And so that is usually what hangs people up from the outside, I think. But once you get into it, it's really whatever you make it in that regard too. It's not like going to church and that they're going to just eat into a strict church of any kind where they're just going to shame you and condemn you until you believe in something. It's not like that. People do have higher powers and gods and Buddhas and Allahs and Jehovah's and everything else that they may choose to articulate. But again, any of that is welcome. There is no one hard, fast rule as to what that spiritual component looks like. People do yoga in there, people do meditation, people pray, people read their Bible. It's just whatever you want to do that helps you realize that you are not always in control of your life and that you need help. That's pretty much the premise of it, is that I need help outside of myself doing this differently. And for some people, their higher power is just the group itself. There's more people there, there's more experience there. It's higher than me in a sense that they may know more or be able to give me something that I haven't been able to give myself. And so if you can think about it that way, I think it's there's more benefits to it for anybody that is looking for something to get involved in. Now, there are other meetings. I think I referenced that. There are other types of meetings that are considered to be more secular. Smart Recovery being one of those. It's really CBT and mind focused, very logical in the way that they talk about triggers and your behaviors and what you did next, and then what did you do and what are your other options. Very solution focused in the way that it talks about recovery. And so that sometimes is a different feel for people, and sometimes people need that. Sometimes people gravitate more towards that type of thinking. Celebrate Recovery, I would say, is a church-based recovery option. It is housed in churches. I wouldn't say it's necessarily tied to a certain denomination, but it's definitely a church organized religion-based type of recovery support. So you have AA that is spiritual and broad stroke when it comes to what faith and spirituality even looks like. And then you have Celebrate Recovery, which is specific to Christianity, I believe. And but the denomination within that, I don't think is really specified or anything like that. So you have Celebrate Recovery. And then we have a lot of online options, I think Women for Sobriety has in-person meetings, but a little less common, a little less accessible, I would say. But the benefit of things going virtual in our world here in the last 4 to 5 years has been that a lot of this stuff is going online. So then we have access to She Recovers, and we have access to Sober Black Girls Club, and Join Monument, which is a alcohol drinking app. Well, I think they have a community too, but there's something with an app that they do there. There's plenty of apps out there that are to help people find their way, and it really just depends on what you need. I would stress the importance of some sort of in-person type of touch point, especially in the beginning. But if that's not possible for whatever reason, it's good to know that there are other options out there that are more accessible and maybe can be incorporated into your life more. Again, there's no requirements for any of these groups. If you have a desire to stop drinking, then my goodness, come on in. That's how it is, okay? Nobody is checking the list to see if you meet criteria, which is the difference between a treatment center, more or less, and these community-based options. Treatment centers are there's gonna have to be some sort of qualifying factors, for that type of, resource to be used. But with community-based stuff, it really is just whatever qualifies you. Come on in. Let's help you get sober. Where there are some discrepancies, I guess you could say, or differences, is that there are some current movements, and I would say, some of them have been around for a while. One in particular I want to talk about, but there's a lot of sober curious people these days. I would say that people who are dependent physically or even emotionally dependent, and that's a specific word, the curious gray area type of approach is probably going to be more challenging to navigate for those people. But there are people who are gray area drinkers where they are not sure of abstinence being the answer. They maybe want to reduce their use and their drinking or whatever. And so there are options for that. Sober curious folks are out there. I wouldn't say that there's for sober curious people, I think it's just a general concept. But there's not like a specific meeting or anything like that. It's just a movement of sorts, a thought, a concept of living that people are exploring and accessing groups accordingly in order to do that individual work for themselves. We also have harm reduction. Harm reduction, I would say, is kind of more geared towards, I think harm reduction shows up with the use of alcohol as well, but that's where we oftentimes think about other drugs and substances that require like harm reduction being, or really alcohol has a lot of harm involved too, but require just a reduction in the risk of safety issues for people themselves, for the user themselves and other people. So it can be the needle exchange. It can be, containing your use in a different way, and maybe using a maintenance level of it instead of a euphoric level. That was something that would induce a high or, whatever the case may be. And so harm reduction has been around for a while. You'll see different organizations participating in giving out condoms and providing free HIV tests and exchanging needles with users to make sure they have clean needles to use, or testing people's drugs to make sure they're not laced with anything for them. So if you're going to use, let's make sure that what you're using is what you thought it was when you bought it. That type of stuff as a harm reduction piece. Now, something I used to always love to talk about with my clients in treatment facilities and stuff was around moderation. Moderation is a tricky one because it's like sober curious people and people who just want to reduce their drinking are kind of walking the line of moderation, right? It's kind of like a moderation mindset thing, but there actually was a movement and a organization established in the early 90s, I think 94, called Moderation Management. Okay, so this was and is actually a concept, and it's still moderation.org is the website for that. I don't like to gatekeep any type of resource. If you feel like it's going to be helpful, by all means, look into it. But it was founded by, I want to find her name. I just looked up her name, but let me find her name. Audrey Kishline. Audrey Kishline was the woman who founded Moderation Management, and she herself was a problem drinker, self-identified problem drinker, but she didn't quite buy into the alcoholism trope. Okay, she didn't feel like she identified with it, couldn't relate to it, and so she came up with, the problem drinker type of space, which is definitely a thing, and then came up with the moderation management focus, which is about people who are not dependent drinkers to learn how to moderate their use. Okay, one drink a day, or just on this day, or certain things around it. But if you're not careful, this can also be attempts to control your use in a way. I'm getting ahead of myself, but sometimes it can mirror on the sense of, is this a way to control something that's out of control, or is this just really a well thought out way of moderating? You have to think about it for yourself. But a lot of solution focused type of approaches to it, and she was successful. Everyone was successful with engaging with that for a while there. So it was founded in 1994, but however, around the year 2000, Audrey Kishline, came out and said that she didn't feel like she was a gray area drinker. She felt like abstinence was the way for her. And so that she would start attending more abstinence-based smart recovery, 12-step, women for sobriety, some of the other ones that are abstinence-based. The goal is to be fully sober. Even if you're not, even if you're going in and out, the ultimate goal is, whereas harm reduction, that's not the ultimate goal, right? Moderation, that's not the ultimate goal. It is the ultimate goal. So she came out with that in January of 2000. And in March of 2000, she was unfortunately driving drunk and crossed over the middle line and hit another car and killed two people. And so she spent some time in prison from that. The founder of Moderation Management spent some time in prison for that, but she was eventually released. However, from what I've read here, Audrey continued to drink after that. And eventually she ended up dying by suicide at the age of 59 in 2014. So, wow. I bring that up. I'm taking that in because my sobriety date is December 3rd, 2014. So if she died on December 19th, 2014, I just didn't realize that it was that close. But I think the trouble or the challenge with gray area drinking is that you never know how gray it is. It's like, is it white? It's not, it's white and black, right? Either you aren't or you are. But then you have this gray, and it's just like, well, what shade of gray are you in? Are you in the light gray over here? Or is your gray in the middle? Or are you getting into the charcoal dark gray where it really is not something that you should engage in anymore? And I think that the heart behind her starting it in 94 was that she was in the gray. You know what I mean? She was in, I don't know what shade, but she felt like she was in the gray, and she probably was. But if you watch the other videos, what we talk about is your tolerance building over time, that the signs of a drinking problem really grow over time. It's, for some people, it's from day one, and they know it from day one, and it's clear from day one. But for many more people, it is a slow trickle. It's a slow trickle. And so it's not always light gray. Eventually, it changes shades to where I can't moderate. And the problem with walking that line is that by the time you realize that you can't moderate, it's time to stop. But by the time it's time to stop and you realize you can't moderate, we're usually dependent. And that becomes the tricky one. It's like, okay, so now something that was within my control to say one drink, two drinks, weekends, whatever. Now I'm realizing that it's not, and oh shoot, I'm out of control. So I can't really just apply one thing or another and sober up just like that. It's much harder to do that, which is why You need that community support. You need that treatment plan. You need that therapist to really pull you out of yourself so that you can get out of your own way and stay sober. You kind of need those parameters at that point. And it sounds like that's kind of where she found herself, is that by the time she realized in January of 2000 that she wasn't going to be able to moderate and maintain that over time, it was 2 months later that she was driving drunk. And this comes from an empathetic place. This comes from just trying to learn the lesson and apply it in moving forward in life. God bless her soul, because addiction is ruthless. It's crazy, but it was about 60 days, 2 months after that threshold was crossed, and you never really know till you know. And we think we're at one place, and we may not be. And what's just as saddening is the continuing to drink after the first, which lets you know, which is a sign that you are dependent. If there are consequences that are happening and you're still drinking past them, you are dependent in your body. You are. And so you need the support, you need the care, you need to get plugged in order to overcome that. And I think that's just the fine line. It doesn't say that she died from drinking or anything. It also reads that she developed a friendship with the wife and mother of the victims of her drunk driving crash, and they authored a book together on their relationship post accident. But she died by suicide at age 59 in 2014. So that's just a somber, sobering thought on moderation and just people really understanding where they are on that spectrum and being 100% honest with yourself. I think that's the thing, is that your mind can start to tell you that something's okay when it's not. And then by the time the consequences that would really be major red flags are coming, now your body is involved in a way that your mind can't just say, stop that. That willpower just isn't quite enough to turn things around. So there are plenty of, I'll circle back to the idea of online spaces. The pandemic was what it was or is what it is, but the beautiful thing that has come out of that is that community recovery spaces are much more accessible. All of those 12-step meetings that I told you that are happening literally all the time, every day, are even more accessible because they have Zoom meetings now. There are other communities, She Recovers being one, Sober Black Girls Club, Join Monument, the Reframe app I've heard of recently. I don't know much about it, but there's the Luckiest Club, there's Temper, there are other platforms and organizations that are offering support for gray area, sober curious drinkers, just as much as folks who desire sobriety. And so that's the beautiful part about it. Lastly, I'll say, a lot of people talk about the role of relapse, like what does recovery really look like? What does sobriety really look like? And a lot of people will tell you that relapse is a part of the process. And I agree with that to a certain extent. We can't necessarily know when those moments are to come or, how to prevent them completely. But I just know that for me personally, it's just been about not forgetting that is something that I want to stay away from, and just creating a life that moves me as far away from that being the outcome as possible, And so my recovery looks like not having alcohol in the home. I let people know that I'm a non-drinker at this point. Most people know, my community. I was actually with some college friends this past weekend, and they just had mocktails and just like options for me. I was like, that is so helpful. Y'all do not understand how helpful it is to have somebody who is understanding of your sobriety and supportive. It really goes a long way. And I think if you have that, with your own personal willingness, your own personal community, doing everything you can to set your life up to where you don't have to go back, and you have the support of people to just help you stay on the straight and narrow, I think that it's possible to move forward and not have a life-shattering relapse, you know, to really be able to just start anew, and have a different experience. So is relapse a part of recovery? For a lot of people, it is. I won't say it's 100% guaranteed to happen. I think it's all relative. Before I got sober, yes, I relapsed, but I was never really sober anyway. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I guess I kind of did, but it really just depends on how you look at it. I think the hardest person to understand that part of it are the loved ones of someone who has a drinking problem. So the next video, we're going to talk about what you can do if you're a loved one. And as I can see that being a very uncertain place to be with someone who is, you know, drinking, and you're not sure if they're going to stop and for how long, and for, you know, it's just really, really uncertain. But there are people out there who have never drank again. Absolutely. So keep that hope alive. Support your people in recovery. Try out recovery. Try out sobriety for yourself, and see the benefits. Thank you all for joining in for tonight. Recovery options. You know, we're talking about alcohol, but we can't just stop with the problem and the issue. We've got to get into the solution and the hope. So I hope that just knowing about some of these options gives somebody who's watching this video some hope. Feel free to comment or reach out to me. Thank you all. Have a good night, and I will see you in the next video.